Hello, everyone, and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. Welcome to the Old World Show. I'm joined again by Tom. Welcome, Tom.
Hello there.
Today, we're going to expand upon the article that confirmed lots of things to us about the game. So it's going to be back on square bases. It's going to be the familiar 28 scale. But on top of that, we're going to talk about 5 things from the game that we love, Warhammer Fantasy Battles, that we would like to remain for Warhammer the Old World, and 5 things from Warhammer Fantasy Battles that we would like to see changed. If you enjoy this video, please be sure to drop it a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, please subscribe. YouTube tells me a lot of people coming back to watch the Old World Show again and again, which is really fantastic, but not everyone is subscribing, so hopefully this is the video that gains your subscription. All right, Tom, do you want to kick us off with the first one that we'd like to see changed?
One thing I'd like to see changed or added to the new Old World game is something that's come to all of the Games Workshop properties. That's the 3 ways to play. So narrative, open play, and matched play. I've had a lot of fun playing the other Games Workshop titles or tabletop games in narrative myself, and I'd love to see that come to the Old World. Have a bit of structure to everything, like every format.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's great to cater for people who just want to play just straight off the bat, to people who really want to delve into the narrative, and people who want to be competitive and at the cutting edge. And earlier, when we were in the pub talking, obviously over pints, we're always talking Warhammer. We were saying that in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, it felt like if you went to a tournament, there was always a big, thick comp pack, and that people were jostling and trying to work out what the meta was and who was strong and who was weak, and trying to get everybody on the same page. And I think included in the 3 ways to play, I would like to see a good structure of FAQ.
Yeah.
So that people are on the same page and units are getting buffs or nerfs kind of as they need. Because obviously we know, or I know as a Wood Elf player, what it's like to go an edition without really getting a book. I did have. Oh, you got a guest in the back.
Yeah, I got a guest.
I did have Bretonians, and we know what it's like. We're waiting for the 8th edition book to drop, and then the world just exploding. So we need people, to write FAQs to help out older books and things like that, and just maintain the meta. But most importantly for me, the reason why I love the Old World so much and want to see the game return is the lore. And I'd love to see some custom narrative scenarios written in, something like, Watchtower, or I was thinking, Chaos might be doing a blood sacrifice, and then you've got to get your units on, interrupt that, and then rescue the person and get them off the table. Little things like that. I think would be great fun. And also, I'd like to see it in all sizes. I wouldn't mind seeing a little. I don't want to say more time, but something like a skirmish as well.
Yeah. I'd like to see it almost like a path to glory also, where you're building up a force. So you start with something small, and then at the end of it, you're playing like a big apocalyptic battle that really means something in the narrative.
How cool would that be to just start off as a humble sort of ragtag band of guys, and then take them through like that journey?
Yeah. Take them through the journey, and then end up joining with a proper Empire retinue of people, and then, go take the fight to some Chaos. You're just roaming around your lands. That'd be brilliant. 500 points to 3,000 points over the space of 6 months or something.
Watch the rise of a hero.
Yeah, that would be really nice. Have some stories to tell when you're drinking beer in a pub. I think that would be brilliant.
But, I think they'll do it. They'd be smart to include the 3 ways to play, because it just caters to everybody.
Yeah.
So, and they've got to get as many people into it as they can, obviously from a business standpoint as much as an enjoyment standpoint.
Absolutely.
What am I going to pick? What would I like to see changed? Oh, Subfactions is what I would like to see. So this is something that started off. We did have some sort of Subfactions. I can remember when I was playing Wood Elves, we had different tropes for different heroes, different kindreds. So you might have a hero who is a war dance, or you might have a hero who is Glamour Weave was one of them, who were like the more magical ones. But that wasn't really reflected in the army so much, just in the general. And I'd like to see subfactions brought around in the old world in the same way that we have them in Age of Sigmar, where, for example, the Sylvaneth have got all different kinds of ones. They've got Oaken Brow and all these different ones, and they all reflect different things. And I think something I'd like to see in the Empire is being able to have someone who's from Hockland, or bring a regiment that are from Nuln, and see what that does.
That would be very cool. Be very interested in like a nice little bit of flavour to add to the meta. Would you like to see that in like a competitive sense, or as well as narrative?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to see different rules, different play styles. Obviously, I'd like internal balance, because what can tend to happen where, for example, when Ossiarch Bone Reapers came out, you were just playing Petrifex because they were the strongest, and it wasn't really about the narrative. But I think in the old world, you do have more of an opportunity. You're going to want to rally behind a certain banner in Bretonia and things like that because you're invested in that army more, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'd really like to see that. A bit like how the Horus Heresy runs things. Like a Space Marine's a Space Marine, but when he's a Space Marine for the Salamanders, he's re-rolling all hits with flame weapons and nothing maybe that to that extreme, but you may see more like of a certain type of unit depending on where from the Empire they're from. Like Hockland, they may have a lot more long rifles, sharpshooters, etc.
Different tribes of orcs as well, all sorts. There's so much they could do with it, and the armies are so rich, and the areas are so rich, and there's so much to go into that it feels like it was a bit of a missed opportunity, really, to have an army that fights exactly the same.
Yeah.
When you bring an Empire army, it's just identical to the next Empire army, and the same with all the elves and things. You could have specialist units, and they did have specialist characters. Again, as I said, they had Corhill, who was leader of the White Lions, and he could bring White Lions with him and things. But more of that basically is what I want to say.
It's a bit like there were dogs of war, weren't there, from all over the old world, but a bit more than that. Right. So one thing I'd like to see, and this is going to be controversial, coming from 8th, the game we all remember and love. I would like to see the removal of the Horde unit. Not in its entirety. I'd like to see some lesser pointed models, zombies, skeletons, things that aren't effective on their own, be able to horde up. Skaven, they should be in a Horde. But I don't really want to see 30 White Lions rolling across the table in a Horde. I don't think that's... I think it's very interesting. Trying to fight that if you've not got any big hordes, big scary hordes yourself. I think it's the reason Magic became so powerful, is because you had these unbreakable hordes that wouldn't ever go anywhere in combat. And you just ended up 6-dicing Purple Sun and taking off someone's Lizard Man army.
Not that it mattered anyway if they had Banner of the World Dragon.
Yeah, that was filthy. That was horrible. That in a unit like Phoenix Guard and White Lions, and you knew it's just like, let's just shake hands now. But really, I want to see smaller units, but it becomes a bit more interesting, becomes a bit more tactical, where you put redirects and getting your flank charges off, because you can charge a whole lot of units into a Horde, but the Horde will probably still beat them back, especially if they get some buffs on them. And they won't go anywhere, they won't run away, just the whole game's tied up in the middle of the table.
They're never going to move, are they?
Yeah.
I think what that will do, Tom, is that will just help free up other phases of the game, because the movement phase would all be taken up by two hordes going into each other, and the deployment phase would all be taken up by, there's just my big unit in the middle. And it would help people to think tactically and move tactically, and it would make things in the game just much more interesting and more nuanced and more tactical. I don't mind, like you said, a big unit of Skaven, because that's what they're like. They're like a tide, aren't they, that come and sweep over the battlefield. So I think what you're talking about really is unit caps. So like there might be a cap of, like the cap for Skaven or skeletons might be all the way up to 40, but for your rare units, you're looking at 0 to 1 in the army, and then up to like 20-25 in the unit.
Yeah, I'd like to see like 25, 30 really pushing it for some of the like great swords from the Empire. I'd like to see that. Just so you can get into combat and do something and not just be taken off the table, but not be there all game if something goes wrong.
So to go along with that one, my pick was more nuanced magic. The reason that I picked that is basically just purely off the fact of the game that we played that one time when I took my Lizardman army, and I was never interested in skinks so much. I know they are actually the best unit in the army, but I wanted strong, tough-looking dinosaurs. So I think I had 2 hordes of Saurus warriors, 1 on each flank, and then in the middle, I had my Temple Guard unit with my Slann in the middle, and that was deployment. And you, Tom, got the first turn. And do you want to just explain how the rest of the game went for everyone?
I rolled rather well for a Night Goblin Shaman, Great Shaman, and he ended up with a bad moon. I rolled up a bad moon that tested his entire army on initiative. And being Lizardmen, they're all 1 and 2. Yeah. And a lot of models got removed from the table in the first turn.
And then I think we shook hands after the magic phase.
Yeah, got to the first magic phase.
Didn't get into charges combat.
There was no need.
It was just like, why have I set up my models?
Yeah.
It took longer to set up than it did to play the game.
It's often the way.
I don't mind magic being crazy in some respects. Like, I'd like to see miscast stay, and I'd like to see a dimensional cascade happen, and part of the board gets sucked into a vortex. Things like that I think are fun.
Yeah.
If they're quite rare to happen, but the game did just become right. I've got 6 dice in my hand, and I'm going to roll all 6 dice, and I'm going to see what happens with my spells. Oh, look, it's cast with irresistible force, and your army's gone.
Yeah.
And like we said with Hordes, it just reduces the tactical options and makes the game less tactical and makes it kind of less enjoyable, I think. And we want to have a game that feels balanced and feels skillful.
Yeah.
And I think that removes or takes away from that a bit.
Absolutely. Being able to get
I'd like to see it not just... obviously, it needs to do damage. Of course, spells need to do damage, but I don't think they need to do horrific damage, and I'd like to see them affect different phases because everyone's going for the damage spells. But I would like to see things like give a unit fly, give a unit ethereal so it can pass through other units in terrain, increase movement, or give you a reform for free. Because how big would it be if you had free reforms for a unit? Like, that would be in a game massive. If you took away all the other kind of damage spells, that would be massive. Things like that, I think I would like to see more.
Yeah. A free swift reform so your unit can turn around and shoot. That is just as game changing as taking off everyone's models, and everybody gets to have fun doing it. Because you can cast that to draw someone's dice out. And let that go, and then your unit turns around and just shoots someone in the face, and then you fireball them with your Ruby Ring of Ruin, or you cast a level 2 fireball. That's much more fun.
I always used to think of Power Rangers, not Power Rangers. I think you might be too young for this, Tom, but when I was a kid, there was a TV show called Captain Planet.
What is
everyone?
That?
So Captain Planet was like recycling. He was all into recycling and looking after the environment. And what Captain Planet used to do was all his agents used to have rings, and they had different elements on their rings, and they had water, fire, earth, magic, and or something. And the last one was heart, and heart always used to save the day. But I used to think the Ruby Ring of Ruin was like that. You get like the fire ring, and you summon Captain Planet. Anyway, I think that's enough of a tangent right there.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So we're not on here to talk about Captain Planet. Although anybody who remembers Captain Planet, well,
I'm going to see if I can find an episode.
People will be old enough to remember Captain Planet. I think you're just too young, Tom, is what it is.
I'm not that young.
All right. So, what's your choice next to get back on topic? The last thing that we want to see changed.
Yeah. Once again, mine links in with, you could tell my mindset with this new edition I'm hoping for. Ties in with Hordes being removed again, and that's initiative and weapons striking in initiative order or having some kind of penalty to initiative. So, like a great weapon, I don't think should necessarily be always strikes last. Especially if you haven't got Hordes, you're not going to have the numbers to survive being like attacked first. So making them strike at maybe -1 initiative or initiative order, I think would just be brilliant. And getting rid of, because I've played a lot of elves, getting rid of always strikes first on a unit that has very high initiative anyway. I mean, it seemed a bit silly.
Initiative, basically like tin openers, and if you strike first with a tin opener against knights or a steam tank or something, like I feel like that might go too far the other way. I don't know really. Always strikes first. Because you used to get rerolls if you had higher initiative than your opponent anyway, and elves always did, and I did think that was quite OP, to be honest.
Yeah.
The thing I would like to see is that I think if you charge, you don't necessarily get the initiative. And I think that would bring a bit more balance into the game, because we all know that cavalry were just incredible, and they just do a long bomb charge. They get the charge that they wanted wherever they wanted it because they had the move and then the extra dice on the charge. And, that already in itself is a massive benefit. But then to be able to go first with their lances down, it began to feel like you didn't really have a chance against cavalry, especially in 6th and 7th edition.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was only talking to Jeremy about this the other day, about his Cold on Knights and how they just used to obliterate me when they weren't stupid. So I'd like to see that, and I think there's good precedent for it because of Lord of the Rings, in that scene where all the elves have just stood with their weapons ready, and they're ready to receive a charge, and actually when the charge comes in, they're the first ones to strike.
Yeah. That's very true. And the thing is, I think when you remove the Hordes from play, then a lot of other things become viable. So in 8th edition, if you wanted to take a unit of 10 knights, and the only thing they had to charge was a big horde block, they'd do well in the first round of combat, and then they'd just like stand around, and the combat would never go anywhere again. But if it went into a unit of 20 swordsmen, they'd probably dice the swordsman up and then be able to move on. So I don't know. It's just like one of those things. I'd like to see the balance, see what happens if they removed it, because I think it changes up so many different things. It gives you so many more tactical options.
Just thank goodness we're not rules writers, Tom. What a difficult job they've got to try and bring.
Get nowhere. I'd just be like, remove Hordes, remove that. That's too much. Keep that in. I play that one, so let's keep that in. I play cannons. Let's get rid of the misfire dice. I'd be a terrible rules writer. Mainly because
all right. Why don't we move on to 5 things that we would like to stay?
Absolutely.
So for 5 things we'd like to stay, I'm gonna kick us off, and I would like to see magic items stay exactly as they were, right down to your 10-point magic items up to your 100-point magic items, and your ability to take a good mix even on one character, which is something that Games Workshop have gone away with. In Age of Sigmar, a hero gets one item and it doesn't cost anything, but I quite like the idea of being able to fit a hero out with a magic sword and a magic shield and a magic pendant and all these sorts of things. I think that it was really cool, like having this toolbox, and some of them were great. I can remember I always used to like to take the Moonstone of Hidden Ways, which let me teleport a unit around and things like that. I'd like them available for units, and I'd like them available in banners, and the more the better, and the more variety types the better.
Yeah,
I would hate for us to lose the amount that there are and go down to a generic few, because they were like we were talking about the Ruby Ring of Ruin just before. They were all sort of just tailored to the armies, and they brought flavor, which is what we want.
Yeah. It was like, I can't remember how many points the Ruby Ring of Ruin was, but it wasn't very many, and it gave you a chance to cast a fireball on a 4+. Like, that's incredible. That's just so much fun, and you can really tailor heroes to do different roles, and you can make things really difficult to kill or make them really killy. Very rarely do both at the same time because the points were just too much, but you could give a bog standard character a chance of actually achieving something in the game. I'm trying to think about what else was cool. There was a wizard's hat, I remember, in there that gave you a level 3/4 wizard, but it made you stupid.
That's right. Yeah,
that was brilliant. I remember taking that. And I'm sure there was a spell in one of the laws to summon a tower.
I want to see the Rune Fang back.
The Reichland Rune Fangs.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Summon the tower. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, you could summon a tower. Oh, take a hero with a small unit, summon a tower, put them in it, and then just come and get me. Because you have to select 10 models to assault. Yeah. You could do some weird stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying about the Rune Fangs?
Oh, I was just saying I want to see it back. I want to see something really, really cool, like your 100-point item that you're looking at and you're thinking, oh my goodness, like an amazing banner that does stuff to your units.
Yeah.
Like I said, I loved them all. You know, I used to take little ones. I used to take the Helm of the Hunt, and I used to take, which was like 15 points, or the Enchanted Shield on someone, all the way through. So yeah, that's something I would like to stay.
Very much so. Magic weapons and items were just brilliant. There's a good 6 pages of them in the main rulebook, and then every faction had 1 or 2 pages worth. Yeah.
What's your choice, Tom? Things to stay.
So I'd like to see the stat lines stay as they were. So weapon skill, strength, toughness, initiative. As much as I love the impact from Age of Sigmar, where you hit on a 3, you wound on a 3, and then you just take handfuls of models off, I think that's brilliant because you get to interact with the game regardless of what's going on. There's just something very classic about the old chart system that I really yearn for now. I want that back in my life. I want to look up charts, figure out when you're hitting on a 7 because your ballistic skill is not quite good enough.
Oh yeah.
It
always used to be wounding on a 7 because I think that there was a tree man that I used to take, and his toughness was like double +1 or something, and then no one could wound him.
You couldn't wound I think it's double +1. Like you couldn't
slave or something.
Slaves, most humans couldn't. You just put it in, and you just couldn't hurt it. And it sounds a bit dull.
Yeah, I think but it just encourages your matchups, and you've got to remember this game was quite rock paper scissors, but that's something that I liked about it, and it always felt great when I think that it feels more real than in Age. I get it in Age of Sigmar. It's quick, it's easy. You always know what you're going to roll. You've just got to look at your War Scroll card and you know what you're doing. But it doesn't take too much longer to work out if you're Strength 4 fighting against something that's Toughness 4. You're wounding on a 4.
Yeah.
And what it does is if you're going up against, let's say, we've been very high elf heavy, but if you're going up against a high elf hero who's like a sword master who's trained with a sword for a millennia, and you're a goblin, it's going to be difficult to hit him. He's going to parry all your blows. Absolutely. And I think that should be reflected in the game.
Yeah. So, if you're that same goblin horde, don't go standing.
Completely agree with you there, Tom.
Yeah. Got to say, if you're the same goblin horde, don't go stand in front of a steam tank.
The lawnmower.
Yeah.
What would I like to see stay? I'd like the point system to stay the same. By that, I mean, when you take a unit, 10 isn't 120 points. One model is 12 points, and upgrade to spears or something is 1 point per model. I'd like to see that, because I used to like to get into the nuance and to kind of min-max and get every point's worth and try and squeeze this in there and that there. And I think that might just be a personality trait of mine. You know, I'm quite comfortable and happy list building. You know this, like before I play a game, I might just in my mind just come up with 2 or 3 lists. I just enjoy that aspect of it. And I think I really enjoyed how it worked there. And there was something that was great where if you were like, you just felt like you could do something to squeeze something else in. And I don't know why. That's just something that I really enjoyed about it. And it gives you more freedom as well. You're not stuck with taking 10 guys when you don't want 10 guys, you know, when 7 or 8 will do the job, or you just don't quite feel like you need the extra rank or something. Or you could do something where, say you had 5 knights, you could take 7 knights, and then your frontage would be too wide and you have 1 each on the diagonals. Whereas now in Age of Sigmar, you'd have to take 5 or 10, and you couldn't do little things like that.
I do. I agree with that.
So
I think that's brilliant. Just trying to think of some really good examples. So like running. Sorry, just to go back. So like, if you really want to min-max, another good thing to do was like, if you knew your opponent was going to run hordes, you had a really, once again, let's go back to high elves because they just had the best everything. You could run Phoenix Guard in like a unit of 21 or 28. You could take like 7 wide and have ranked back, because the horde would never get to hit you entirely, and even if they did hit you, they just wouldn't do any damage. So you can maximize your number of attacks back because you knew the size, the frontage of the armies you'd face, if that makes sense. You do weird little things like that and help you get flanks in. And you know, if you couldn't charge the enemy's front, you could always charge into the rear, not rear, to the flank, because you didn't have to always make way. That was a really weird, nuanced little rule, but there's so many. Yeah.
So I was just having flashbacks to playing with Jeremy and trying to make flank charges and trying to work out if 50% of your like army was towards the flank or towards the front, and then just like endlessly bickering about it. Yeah,
that
the last
was a thing.
Sorry, just to move on, Tom. The last 2 that we're going to talk about, I think they're kind of rolled into one, really. So I've picked guess ranges and templates. And what have you picked?
Yeah, I've picked flavor or army nuance.
So I think they are similar, because in my mind, flavor is all the little crazy random stuff that's going on in this magical world that we love so much. And I wanted to see things like the template come back for like the flame cannon and think dragon's breath.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see, like, if you killed a giant, if you fell into your opponent's army and like squished half of them. And I think that actually, to be honest, is a way of representing flavor. So that's all I'm going to say on it, and I'll just let you expand, I think.
So the reason I like the flavor of the army nuances, one of my second army was orcs and goblins. So I was always competing with animosity. You find ways to mitigate animosity in its own way. So black orcs everywhere. You just smack your own troops around. But on the one occasion you didn't have a black orc around to support you, I remember one game against Graham, I had a unit of spider riders. They rolled a 1, and then they rolled a 6, so they got to perform a normal move towards the nearest enemy, and then got to charge after it. So they got to move like 10 inches, and then his closest cannon to me was, after that, 14 inches away with a 10-inch move, because that's how far they moved. So I had to roll a 4 to charge across the board and go and eat his cannon. Just something like that. It just changes the game. I never would have planned for that to have happened on turn 1. and there it is. It's just like the whole game gets flipped up on his head because I rolled a 1, then a 6. Like you just can't plan for it, and it's absolutely brilliant. I can see how it's frustrating, though.
Yeah, it is frustrating, but then I think you just have to kind of be in the spirit that this is a dice game and these things can happen, and it's more fun that they do happen. You know, like your steam tank getting blown up or your wizard getting dimensional cascaded off the table. These things, you know, this is the world that we're talking about. This is what it's like, and if it's not represented fully on the tabletop, it isn't the fun game that we remember. And like you said,
no,
you know, how many years later are we still talking about like that time your Spider Riders went crazy and charged off across the table?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Like, it creates such a good story. So I just don't see why I don't want to see it gone, and I'd like to see a bit more of it added in across the rest of the army books, to be honest.
There's one that I remember that is like, oh, goodness me, this would be, we are touching 20 years ago now, when I was about 14, 15, and my mate Tom had Teclis, and Teclis could re-roll his miscast, of course.
Yeah.
He miscast, re-rolled his miscast, and miscast.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. And like I said, you know, we're 20 years down the line and we still think these moments are funny and interesting and cool, and that is what it's all about, really. So yeah, that's something I'd definitely like to stay. Please, Games Workshop, keep the flavor and bring us back some Falling Giant templates and this kind of crazy stuff.
I want to see gyrocopters with flame templates, stone throwers, all of it. And it provides an element of gameplay you just can't plan for, no matter how much you try. And no matter how good you are strategically, if it's going to go wrong, it's guaranteed to go wrong in this game. So you just got to plan around that.
I think what you're saying, Tom, is as well as fighting your opponent, you then have to fight an internal struggle against your own units.
Yeah, it happens often. As an Orcs and Goblins player back in the day, it happened more often than not. Do my units want to fight each other? Yes, they do. Who wins?
But when it happens, it happens. Like, they go off, don't they?
Yeah.
They do really well.
Oh, they really go off. Yeah. But then, it's like one game where you never roll an animosity. Your Orcs and Goblins charge across the table and just eat everything. Top tier army book.
I think that takes us to everything. That's everything we wanted to talk about today. So I think we will leave it there. But please, guys, in the comments, put down what you would like to see change and what you would like to stay. I think it'd be great to get a conversation started and let us know about your most memorable moments. I think me and Tom are going to do a whole video on that. We're just going to do a shorter video than this, perhaps, and we'll do our kind of top 3 things that happened in games.
Yeah.
Ever. We've mentioned a couple ones that might come up, but I think it's just fun to talk about these sorts of things. All right, well, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for joining, Tom.
Thank you very much.
As always, and